I can't forget that Saturday morning. The sun was barely up, the grass still smelled freshly cut, and I was just setting down my coffee when she appeared, marching past my lawn with that familiar glare, the kind that could sour milk. Karen, my neighbor, my headache, my self-appointed judge, jury, and executioner. She paused at the edge of my backyard, staring at the two simple lawn chairs I had set up the day before. Ordinary wooden chairs, nothing fancy, nothing out of place. But the way she squinted at them, you'd think I had built an amusement park ride on my grass. I knew from that very moment something ridiculous was about to happen. Those chairs meant nothing to anyone else. To me, they were a small victory. My week had been exhausting, and I wanted a space where I could sit quietly, sip my coffee, and let the world fade away. They weren't bolted into the ground. They weren't gaudy. Just two plain wooden chairs and a little table between them, topped with a potted plant. It was a corner of peace in a neighborhood that rarely gave me any. But to Karen, my backyard oasis was apparently a violation of some unwritten law. She glared for a few more seconds, shook her head in disapproval, and walked off like she was filing the moment away in her mental courtroom. That should have been the end of it. But with her, nothing ever ended quietly. Karen had a reputation. She wasn't on the HOA board, but you would never know that from the way she acted. Clipboard in hand, camera phone always ready, she patrolled the neighborhood as if she were being paid to enforce rules nobody else even cared about. People tried ignoring her. Some even tried standing up to her. But she never seemed to stop. To Karen, everything was an offense waiting to be corrected, and she was the self-appointed savior of property values. By evening, I overheard her loud voice floating across the street. She was telling another neighbor about unsanctioned furniture and eyesores lowering the community standard. She never mentioned me by name, but I knew. Everyone knew. The chairs were the latest target of her crusade. I laughed it off at first. After all, who would seriously pick a fight over backyard seating? But as I would learn the next morning, Karen wasn't just serious, she was prepared to escalate. I had just taken my coffee outside again, settling into one of the chairs, when I heard the sound of car doors closing. I turned and froze. Two uniformed police officers were walking up my driveway. My stomach dropped. Seeing law enforcement show up on a quiet weekend morning is never a good feeling, and for a split second, I wondered if something terrible had happened. But no. The officers explained, as politely as possible, that they had received a call about illegal structures on my property. Illegal structures on my property. I blinked in disbelief, glancing at the chairs. The officers followed my gaze, and I could see the flicker of confusion on their faces too. These were not sheds, decks, or garages. They were two plain chairs and a small table. Before I could even respond, the source of the chaos appeared. Karen stormed out of her house like she had been waiting for her cue. Her voice rose instantly, echoing across the street, announcing to anyone within earshot that I was in violation of neighborhood rules. She jabbed her finger toward my backyard and declared my setup an unauthorized structure, a blemish on the community, and a threat to property values. She spoke as if she were testifying before a judge, her words sharp and dripping with righteous certainty. The officers let her speak, probably out of politeness, but also maybe just to see how far she would go. And she went far. She accused me of undermining community standards, of ignoring procedures, and even of creating a safety hazard. Yes, she claimed my chairs were a hazard. To whom? I still don't know. I stayed quiet, letting her spin her own web. The officers finally asked her to clarify what law or code I was violating. That's when she pulled out her arsenal, a crumpled stack of papers from her bag. She waved them dramatically, insisting they were HOA guidelines, proof of my guilt. But even from a distance, I could tell the papers were random printouts, some not even from our neighborhood association. She jabbed her finger at paragraphs that had nothing to do with outdoor furniture, twisting the meaning to suit her vendetta. The officers remained calm, flipping through her so-called evidence. Then they turned back to me, asking a few questions. Were the chairs permanent? No. Were they blocking any public access or encroaching on someone else's property? No. Were they prohibited by HOA rules? Absolutely not. I knew because I had checked before buying them. The verdict came quickly. I had done nothing wrong. My chairs were perfectly legal. There was no violation, no problem, no reason for the police to be there at all. Karen's face twisted with disbelief. Instead of backing down, she doubled her volume. She accused the officers of incompetence, insisted they were failing in the duty, and demanded they force me to remove the chairs anyway. Her voice carried so loudly that more neighbors began peeking out from behind curtains and front doors. But then came the twist. As she waved her papers around, one of the officers noticed something. Among the random guidelines was a document with her own name on it, a notice of violation. Apparently, she had been warned weeks earlier for failing to trim the weeds along her fence and for leaving garbage cans out days past pickup. The officer calmly pointed this out, noting that she herself was in violation of the very rules she was trying to weaponize against me. The look on her face was unforgettable. Her righteous fury collapsed into stammering excuses. She tried to claim the notices were clerical errors, that she had been unfairly targeted, but the officers weren't buying it. They reminded her that making a false report wasted police resources. And then, right there in front of everyone, they handed her a citation. A fine for filing a frivolous complaint and harassing her neighbor. Neighbors had begun to gather by now, quietly watching the scene unfold. Some had their phones out. Word would spread quickly. Karen, who had strutted out with the confidence of a conqueror, now stood red-faced and humiliated on her own driveway, being lectured by the very officers she had summoned as her backup. As for me, I simply sat back down in my chair. I lifted my coffee, took a slow sip, and enjoyed the taste of vindication. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to gloat. The truth had spoken for itself, and Karen's downfall was complete. In the days that followed, the neighborhood buzzed with the story. Karen's reputation, already fragile, took a serious blow. People stopped taking her self-appointed authority seriously. She stopped patrolling the streets, the clipboard vanished, and her glare lost its sting. She had been exposed as hypocritical, petty, and powerless. Meanwhile, my chairs remained exactly where I wanted them. They became more than just a place to sit. They became a symbol. A reminder that sometimes, the loudest people in the room collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. That peace doesn't always come from fighting back. Sometimes, it comes from letting people destroy themselves with their own nonsense. Even now, when I step into my backyard and sink into one of those chairs, I remember that morning. The coffee, the sun, the sight of 2 police officers walking up my driveway, and the moment my neighbor's crusade crumbled in front of everyone. Karen called the cops on my lawn chairs. But in the end, it wasn't me who paid the price. It was her. And it was the biggest mistake